Lonely rancher stopped a mother from selling her daughter for flour and offered a ring instead. The wind howled across the Wyoming plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of the harshest winter Cedar Ridge had seen in a decade. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blanketing the frontier town in a desolate white silence that seemed to muffle even the heartbeat of civilization itself. Through this frozen wasteland, a lone figure on horseback emerged from the storm, his weathered face barely visible beneath the brim of his ice-crusted hat. Samuel Mackenzie pulled his horse to a halt outside Morrison's general store, the animal's breath forming ghostly clouds in the bitter air. At 42, Sam carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had learned to rely on no one but himself. His broad shoulders bore the weight of years spent working the land, and his calloused hands told the story of countless dawns spent mending fences and herding cattle across the unforgiving terrain of his ranch. The Mackenzie spread stretched across 3,000 acres of prime grazing land, inherited from his father and built into prosperity through Sam's own sweat and determination. Yet for all his success, Sam remained a solitary figure in the community, a man who spoke little, smiled rarely, and kept his deepest sorrows locked away behind steel-gray eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. As he dismounted and tied his horse to the post, the memories came flooding back as they always did during these trips to town. 7 years had passed since Sarah's death. 7 years since he'd held his wife's hand as she slipped away after giving birth to their stillborn son. The double loss had hollowed him out, leaving him a shell of the man he once was. He'd thrown himself into his work, expanding the ranch, building his herd, but no amount of success could fill the emptiness that had taken root in his chest. The bell above the store's door chimed as Sam pushed inside, grateful for the warmth that enveloped him. The familiar sense of leather, tobacco, and dried goods filled his nostrils as he stamped the snow from his boots. Behind the counter, Harold Morrison looked up from his ledger book, his round face creasing into a smile. "Sam Mackenzie," Harold called out, his voice carrying the jovial tone of a man who'd made his living by being friendly to everyone. "Didn't expect to see you in this weather. That storm's been raging for 3 days straight." Sam nodded, pulling off his gloves and flexing his stiff fingers. "Running low on supplies. Figured I'd better make the trip before it gets worse." "Wise thinking. Coffee's hot if you want some while you gather what you need." "Much obliged." Sam accepted the steaming cup Harold offered, feeling the warmth seep through his frozen hands. As he sipped the bitter brew, his eyes wandered around the store, taking in the familiar sights of civilization that seemed so foreign after weeks alone on the ranch. It was then that he heard the voices, hushed, urgent, desperate. Near the back of the store, partially hidden behind a display of farming tools, 2 women huddled together in conversation. One was middle-aged, her dress patched and worn, her face gaunt with the telltale signs of hunger and worry. The other was younger, perhaps 19 or 20, with long auburn hair that caught the lamplight and eyes the color of spring grass. "Please, Elena," the older woman was saying, her voice thick with tears. "I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. The flour's almost gone, and with this storm, there has to be another option, Mama." The younger woman replied, her voice steady despite the fear Sam could see in her eyes. I can't." Sam tried to focus on his shopping, but something in their desperation called to him. He'd seen that look before, the hollow-eyed stare of people pushed to their breaking point. Moving closer under the pretense of examining some rope, he caught more of their conversation. "Mr. Garrett's offer still stands," the older woman continued, her voice barely above a whisper. 20 pounds of flour, enough salt pork to last the winter, and coal for the stove. All for you to work in his saloon." Elena's face went pale. "Mama, you know what kind of work that would be. I'd rather starve than—" "But I won't let you starve," the older woman's voice cracked. "I'm your mother, Elena. It's my job to keep you alive, even if it means—" Sam's jaw tightened. He knew Thomas Garrett, the man who owned the Lucky Dollar Saloon. Garrett was wealthy, influential, and completely without scruples when it came to the young women who worked for him. The thought of this girl, Elena, being sold to such a man made his blood boil. The conversation continued, each word cutting deeper into Sam's conscience. The older woman, who he now realized must be Martha Collins, the widow who'd lost her husband in a mining accident 6 months ago, was clearly at the end of her rope. Her small cabin on the outskirts of town offered little protection from the harsh winter, and with no man to provide for them, she and her daughter were facing starvation. "The decision is made," Martha said finally, her voice hollow with defeat. "I'll speak to Mr. Garrett today. The arrangement can begin tomorrow." Elena's composure finally cracked. "Mama, please. There has to be another way. I'll work. I'll clean houses, take in washing, anything but this. In this weather, there's no work, child. No one has money to spare for luxuries like clean laundry when they're struggling to feed their own families." Sam set down his coffee cup with a sharp clink, his decision made. He'd stood by and watched too much suffering in his life. His wife's death, his unborn son's stillbirth, the gradual erosion of his own humanity. He wouldn't stand by and watch this. Stepping around the display of tools, he cleared his throat softly. Both women looked up, startled by his presence. Martha's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, while Elena's eyes met his with a mixture of pride and desperation. "Pardon me, ladies," Sam said, his voice gentle despite the steel in his gray eyes. "I couldn't help but overhear. Mrs. Collins, isn't it? Martha Collins?" Martha nodded, her chin lifting slightly in defensive pride. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry if we were disturbing you. We'll keep our voices down. No need to apologize. I'm Sam Mackenzie. I own the spread north of town." He paused, studying both women carefully. "I believe I might have a solution to your problem." Hope flickered in Elena's eyes, while Martha's expression remained guarded. "What kind of solution, Mr. Mackenzie?" Sam had acted on instinct, but now he needed to think quickly. What could he offer that would save this girl from Garrett's clutches while preserving the dignity of both women? The answer came to him with startling clarity. "I'm in need of a housekeeper," he said simply. "Someone to cook, clean, manage the household. The work would include room and board, plus wages enough to keep you both comfortable through the winter and beyond." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at him with wide eyes while Martha's face cycled through confusion, hope, and suspicion. "Mr. Mackenzie," Martha said slowly, "that's very generous, but I don't understand. You don't know us. Why would you—" "Because it's the right thing to do," Sam interrupted, his voice firm. "And because I've been living like a hermit for too long. A house needs a woman's touch, and I need someone who can cook something more substantial than beans and hardtack." Elena found her voice. "What exactly would be expected of me, Mr. Mackenzie? Honest work. Cooking, cleaning, maybe some mending. You'd have your own room, your privacy respected. I'm not Thomas Garrett, Miss Collins. I'm offering employment, nothing more." The relief in Elena's eyes was unmistakable, but Martha still seemed hesitant. "And the wages? $20 a month, plus room and board for both of you. You're welcome to stay as well, Mrs. Collins. The house is large enough, and I suspect your daughter would be more comfortable with you nearby." It was a generous offer, more than generous. Most housekeepers in the territory made half that amount, and the inclusion of Martha in the arrangement showed a consideration that spoke to Sam's character. Elena looked at her mother, hope shining in her green eyes for the first time in months. "Mama?" Martha studied Sam's face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motives. What she saw there seemed to reassure her. The weathered features of a man who'd known loss, the steady gaze of someone who understood the value of honest work, and perhaps most importantly, the deep loneliness that matched her own. "We accept," Martha said quietly. "When would you like us to start?" "As soon as you can gather your belongings. I'll have my wagon ready within the hour." As Sam turned to complete his own shopping, he caught sight of Thomas Garrett entering the store, his expensive coat and predatory smile making Sam's skin crawl. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more dangerous. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the warmth of Morrison's store, the first seeds of something precious had been planted. Sam Mackenzie had no idea that his act of compassion would lead to the greatest transformation of his life, or that the young woman he'd just saved would become his salvation in return. The die was cast, and there would be no turning back. The journey to the Mackenzie ranch took nearly 3 hours through the blinding snow, with Sam's sturdy wagon cutting deep ruts in the drifts that had accumulated along the winding trail. Martha and Elena huddled together under thick wool blankets in the wagon bed, their few possessions packed into 2 worn carpet bags and a wooden crate that held Martha's most precious belongings: her late husband's Bible, a silver locket, and a faded daguerreotype of their wedding day. Elena found herself stealing glances at the broad-shouldered man who drove the wagon with such steady confidence. Sam Mackenzie remained an enigma to her, a stranger who had appeared like an answer to prayer in their darkest hour. She studied the way his capable hands held the reins, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon for dangers, and the way he seemed to carry an invisible weight that matched her own family's struggles. "Are you certain about this, Elena?" Martha whispered, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "We know nothing about this man. What if he's worse than Mr. Garrett?" Elena finished her mother's unspoken fear. "Mama, look at him. Really look. He didn't have to help us. He could have walked away, pretended he hadn't heard, but he didn't." Martha's weathered hand found her daughter's. "You're right, of course. It's just, after everything we've been through, it's hard to believe that good fortune could find us." The Mackenzie ranch house materialized through the storm like a beacon of hope. Built from solid timber and local stone, it was larger than Elena had expected. A 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and smoke rising from 3 separate chimneys. The barn and outbuildings were equally impressive, speaking to the prosperity Sam had built through years of hard work. Sam brought the wagon to a halt near the front steps and jumped down, his boots crunching in the snow. "Welcome to your new home," he said simply, offering his hand to help the women down from the wagon. Elena's fingers touched his briefly as she accepted his assistance, and she felt a jolt of something unexpected. Not fear, but a strange flutter in her chest that she couldn't quite name. Sam's hand was warm and calloused, strong enough to crush but gentle in its touch. "It's beautiful," Elena breathed, taking in the solid craftsmanship of the house. After months of living in their drafty cabin with its leaking roof and broken windows, this felt like a palace. Sam's cheeks reddened slightly at the compliment. "Built it myself, mostly. Took the better part of 3 years." He hefted their bags with ease. "Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm." The interior of the house was a revelation. The main room featured a massive stone fireplace that cast dancing shadows across hand-hewn wooden floors. Comfortable furniture, a leather sofa, 2 armchairs, and a solid oak dining table spoke of a man who valued quality over ostentation. But it was the small details that caught Elena's attention. The layer of dust on every surface, the cold ashes in the fireplace, the general air of neglect that suggested this house had been more shelter than home for far too long. "I'll show you to your rooms," Sam said, leading them up a sturdy staircase. "Elena, this will be yours." He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with a large window overlooking the snow-covered pastures. A 4-poster bed dominated the room, along with a dresser, washstand, and a small desk beneath the window. "It's wonderful," Elena said, running her fingers along the smooth wood of the desk. "Did you make this furniture as well?" "Some of it." Sam seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "The bed and dresser came from back east when I first built the house. The desk, that was for my wife Sarah. She liked to write letters." The mention of his late wife cast a momentary shadow over the room. Elena noticed the way Sam's voice changed when he spoke of Sarah, softer, more vulnerable, touched with a grief that time hadn't fully healed. "Mrs. Collins, your room is just down the hall," Sam continued, leading Martha to a smaller but equally comfortable bedroom. "The washroom is between the 2 rooms. There's a pump in the kitchen for water, and I keep plenty of wood stacked by the back door." "Mr. Mackenzie," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. This is more than generous." "No need for thanks. You'll earn your keep." Sam's tone was matter of fact, but Elena detected a hint of something warmer beneath the surface. "Elena, if you're up to it, I thought you might start by preparing dinner. The kitchen is well stocked, and I haven't had a proper meal in longer than I care to admit." The kitchen was indeed impressive. A large room with a cast-iron stove, ample counter space, and shelves lined with preserved goods, flour, sugar, and spices. Elena felt a surge of excitement as she explored the space. Cooking had always been her joy, and the thought of preparing meals in such a well-appointed kitchen filled her with anticipation. "I'll need to tend to the animals," Sam said, pulling on his coat. "Take your time settling in. Dinner whenever you're ready." As the door closed behind him, Elena found herself alone with her mother in their new sanctuary. Martha sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her face showing the strain of the day's events. "Elena, what have we gotten ourselves into?" Martha asked, though her tone suggested wonder rather than worry. I don't know, Mama, but it feels like a new beginning. Elena began exploring the pantry, her mind already planning their first meal. Did you see the way he looked when he mentioned his wife? That man is carrying pain just like we are. All the more reason to be careful. Grief can make people unpredictable. Elena paused in her exploration, considering her mother's words. Or it can make them kind. Think about it, Mama. He saved us from a terrible fate, and he's asking for nothing in return but honest work. When was the last time anyone showed us such kindness? Martha's expression softened. You're right, dear. I suppose I've become too suspicious. It's hard to trust in good fortune when you've had so little of it. As Elena prepared their first meal, a hearty stew made from beef she found in the cold storage, along with potatoes, carrots, and onions, she found herself thinking about their mysterious benefactor. Sam Mackenzie was unlike any man she'd ever encountered. He possessed a quiet strength that spoke of deep character, and his intervention at the store had revealed a moral compass that pointed true north. The sound of boots on the porch announced Sam's return. He entered the kitchen carrying an armload of firewood, his cheeks reddened by the cold and his dark hair damp with melting snow. Smells incredible in here, he said, setting the wood by the stove. I can't remember the last time this kitchen felt so alive. It should be ready in a few minutes, Elena replied, stirring the stew. I hope you don't mind that I took some liberties with your stores. That's what they're for. Sam settled into a chair at the kitchen table, and Elena noticed how his presence seemed to fill the space without overwhelming it. Elena, I should probably explain about the arrangement. You'll have Sundays off and I'll respect your privacy. I'm not a demanding employer, but I do appreciate punctuality and honest work. Of course. Elena ladled the stew into bowls, her hands steady despite the flutter in her chest whenever Sam spoke her name. Mr. Mackenzie, may I ask you something? Sam. And yes, you may. Why did you really help us today? I mean, I'm grateful beyond words, but... Sam was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying the steam rising from his bowl. Because I know what it's like to be desperate. After Sarah died, I came close to losing everything. The ranch, my sanity, my will to live. If it hadn't been for the kindness of neighbors who helped me through that first winter, I might not have survived. Elena felt her heart constrict at the pain in his voice. I'm sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago. Sam took a spoonful of the stew and his eyes widened slightly. This is exceptional. Where did you learn to cook like this? My mother taught me, and I've always enjoyed experimenting with flavors. Elena felt a warm glow at his praise. Back home, I used to cook for church socials and harvest celebrations. Well, you've certainly elevated the standard of cuisine at the Mackenzie Ranch. Sam's rare smile transformed his entire face, making him seem younger and less burdened. I think this arrangement is going to work out very well. As they ate together in the warm kitchen, snow continuing to fall outside, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something more. The way Sam looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the careful respect he showed both her and her mother, the genuine appreciation in his voice when he spoke of her cooking, all of it pointed to possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. Martha had fallen asleep in her chair by the fire, exhausted by the day's events and the warmth of their new home. Elena gently covered her mother with a quilt, then returned to the kitchen to find Sam still sitting at the table, lost in thought. She's had a difficult time since Papa died, Elena said quietly, beginning to clear the dishes. This means more to her than you know. And what about you, Elena? What does this mean to you? The question caught her off guard. She paused in her work, considering her answer carefully. It means I get to keep my dignity. It means I don't have to become something I'm not just to survive. It means, yes, it means I get to discover who I really am, away from desperation and fear. Sam nodded slowly, understanding flickering in his eyes. I hope you find what you're looking for. What about you, Sam? What are you looking for? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Sam stood, moving to the window where he could see the snow-covered pastures of his domain. I stopped looking for anything a long time ago, he said finally, but maybe it's time I started again. As Elena finished cleaning the kitchen and prepared to retire to her new room, she felt the weight of change settling around them all. The storm outside would eventually pass, but the storm of transformation that had begun in Morrison's store was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Elena and Martha arrived at the Mackenzie Ranch, and the harsh winter seemed to be loosening its grip on the Wyoming territory. The daily routine had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Elena would rise before dawn to prepare breakfast. Sam would spend his days tending to the cattle and maintaining the ranch, and evenings found the three of them sharing meals and quiet conversation by the fire. Elena had transformed the house in ways Sam hadn't expected. The dust had vanished from every surface. Fresh flowers from the greenhouse graced the dining table, and the aroma of freshly baked bread had become a constant presence. But it was more than just cleanliness. There was life in the house again, laughter echoing through rooms that had known only silence for years. On this particular morning, Elena stood at the kitchen window watching Sam work with a particularly stubborn calf in the nearby pen. He moved with practiced ease, his patience evident as he coaxed the young animal to accept its halter. The sight stirred something deep in Elena's chest, an admiration that had been growing stronger with each passing day. "You're watching him again?" Martha observed from her seat at the kitchen table where she was mending one of Sam's shirts. Elena's cheeks flushed. He's very skilled with the animals." "Is that what you call it?" Martha's smile was knowing. "Elena, dear, I've seen how you look at him, and more importantly, I've seen how he looks at you." "Mama, that's nonsense. Mr. Mackenzie, Sam, he's just being kind. He's still mourning his wife. A man can mourn his past and still hope for his future." Martha set down her needle and studied her daughter's face. "You care for him, don't you?" Elena turned from the window, her green eyes reflecting the confusion in her heart. "I don't know what I feel. He's unlike any man I've ever known. He's gentle but strong, generous but not foolish. When he speaks to me, I feel like he truly sees me, not just what I can do for him. Those are dangerous feelings for a woman in our position." "Why dangerous?" Martha's expression grew serious. "Because we're dependent on his kindness. If feelings developed that weren't returned, where would that leave us? We have nowhere else to go, Elena." Before Elena could respond, the kitchen door opened and Sam entered, bringing with him the scent of hay and the crisp morning air. His dark hair was tousled, and there was a smudge of dirt on his jaw that Elena found herself wanting to brush away. "Morning, ladies," Sam said, hanging his coat on the peg by the door. "Elena, that coffee smells like heaven itself." "It's fresh," Elena replied, pouring him a cup and trying to ignore the way their fingers touched when he accepted it. "How's the new calf?" "Stubborn as his mother, but he'll come around." Sam settled into his usual chair, and Elena noticed the way he automatically saved the seat beside him for her. "I was thinking, the weather's been mild enough that we might be able to make a trip to town today. You ladies might enjoy seeing other people, and I need to pick up supplies." Elena's heart leaped at the suggestion. While she'd grown to love the ranch, she missed the bustle of town life, the opportunity to see other faces and hear news from the outside world. "That sounds wonderful," Martha said. "I'd like to visit the church if that's possible. I haven't been to services in weeks." "Of course. We'll make a day of it." Sam's eyes met Elena's. "Elena, you might enjoy seeing what Morrison's has in the way of fabric. I noticed you've been making do with some rather worn dresses." The kindness in his voice made Elena's throat tight. "Sam, you've already done so much for us, I couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." His tone was firm but gentle. "A woman should have a proper wardrobe, especially one who works as hard as you do." The trip to Cedar Ridge proved to be a revelation. Elena had worried that people might look at her differently, knowing she was living at the Mackenzie Ranch, but instead, she found herself greeted with warmth and curiosity. It seemed that Sam's reputation in the community was sterling, and his decision to hire her reflected well on them both. At Morrison's store, Sam insisted on purchasing not just fabric, but also thread, buttons, and even a new pair of boots for Elena. His generosity was both touching and overwhelming, and Elena found herself struggling to express her gratitude. "Sam, this is too much," she protested as he added a bolt of deep blue wool to their growing pile of purchases. "Nonsense. You've been wearing the same 3 dresses since you arrived. A woman needs variety." He held up the fabric against her face, and Elena's breath caught at his proximity. "This color brings out your eyes." The compliment sent warmth spreading through Elena's chest. Sam's gray eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and she felt certain that Martha's suspicions might have some foundation. There was something in his gaze, a tenderness that went beyond mere employer consideration. Their shopping was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the store's front window, Elena could see a crowd gathering around a familiar figure, Thomas Garrett, the saloon owner whose proposition had nearly destroyed her life. He was holding court with several other men, his voice carrying clearly through the glass. "I tell you, it's not natural," Garrett was saying, his tone full of insinuation. "A young woman like that, living alone with Mackenzie. People are starting to talk." Sam's jaw tightened and Elena saw his hands clench into fists. "Stay here," he said quietly, but Elena was already moving toward the door. "No," she said firmly. "If he's talking about me, I have a right to face him." Outside, Garrett's voice had attracted a small crowd. Elena recognized several faces from church, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. When Garrett saw her approaching, his smile turned predatory. Well, the lady in question." Garrett's voice dripped with false courtesy. "Miss Collins, I trust you're finding your new employment satisfactory?" "My employment is exactly that, Mr. Garrett." "Employment." Elena's voice was steady despite the anger burning in her chest. "Honest work for honest pay." "Of course it is," Garrett replied, his tone suggesting he believed nothing of the sort. "Though I must say, Mackenzie's sudden need for a housekeeper, especially such a young and attractive one, has raised some eyebrows in town." Sam stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Are you suggesting something improper about my household, Garrett?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply observing that a man in your position might have chosen someone older for such a position, someone less likely to cause talk." Elena felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Around them, the crowd was growing, and she could see the speculation in their eyes. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity, and a few reflected the kind of judgment that could destroy a woman's reputation. "The only improper thing here," Sam said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "is your insinuation that Miss Collins is anything other than a respectable woman doing respectable work." "I'm sure she is," Garrett replied smoothly, "though I can't help but wonder what might happen if your arrangement were to become more permanent. A man gets lonely, especially one who's been alone as long as you have." The crowd murmured, and Elena felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. She understood now what Martha had meant about their precarious position. One whisper of scandal could ruin everything, not just her own reputation, but Sam's standing in the community. "Mr. Garrett," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the square, "I appreciate your concern for my welfare, but I assure you it's unnecessary. Mr. Mackenzie has been nothing but honorable in his treatment of both my mother and myself." "Of course he has," Garrett said, but his smirk suggested otherwise. "Still, appearances matter in a small town. People might wonder if a more formal arrangement might be appropriate." The implication hung in the air like a challenge. Elena felt her heart racing, understanding that Garrett was essentially suggesting that Sam should either marry her or dismiss her to avoid scandal. The calculated cruelty of it took her breath away. "That's enough," Sam said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've said your piece, Garrett. Now I suggest you move along before I decide to respond in a way that won't be quite so civil." For a moment the two men faced each other, and Elena could feel the tension crackling between them. Finally Garrett stepped back, his smile never wavering. "No harm intended, Mackenzie. Just looking out for the moral fiber of our community." He tipped his hat to Elena. "Miss Collins, I hope you'll consider what I've said. Sometimes the most generous offer comes with the highest price." As Garrett walked away, the crowd began to disperse, but Elena could feel the lingering stares and whispered conversations. The damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and in a small town like Cedar Ridge, such seeds had a way of growing into destructive rumors. Sam placed a gentle hand on Elena's arm. "Are you all right?" Elena nodded, though she felt anything but all right. "I'm fine. But Sam, what he said, people are going to talk. Let them talk. Anyone who knows me knows the truth. But what if they don't? What if this affects your standing in the community? Your business relationships?" Sam's expression was thoughtful as he considered her words. "Elena, I won't lie to you. Garrett's words will spread, and some people will believe the worst. but I refuse to let fear dictate how I live my life. As they returned to the store to complete their purchases, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The comfortable routine they'd established at the ranch suddenly felt fragile, threatened by the weight of public opinion and the malicious whispers of a man who had his own reasons for wanting to destroy her happiness. That evening, as they sat by the fire at the ranch, the conversation was more subdued than usual. Martha sensed the tension and retired early, leaving Elena and Sam alone in the flickering light. "I'm sorry about what happened today," Elena said quietly. "I never wanted to bring trouble to your door." "You didn't bring trouble. Garrett did." Sam's voice was firm. "Elena, I want you to know that nothing he said changes anything between us. You're welcome here for as long as you want to stay." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at his kindness. "But what if the talk continues? What if it affects your reputation?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "There's something I need to tell you," he said finally. "Something I should have said weeks ago." Elena's heart began to race. "What is it?" "The reason I helped you that day in Morrison's store, it wasn't just compassion. It was because—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of you being hurt. From the moment I saw you, something in me woke up that I thought had died with Sarah." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs, her mouth suddenly dry. "Sam," she whispered, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Thomas Garrett might be a bastard, but he's not entirely wrong. My feelings for you have gone far beyond those of an employer for his employee." The words she'd been hoping to hear and dreading in equal measure had finally been spoken. Elena looked into Sam's gray eyes and saw not just desire, but something deeper, a vulnerability that matched her own. "I feel the same way," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "But Mama was right. It's dangerous for us to feel this way. We're dependent on your kindness, and if things went wrong, they won't go wrong," Sam said, moving closer to her on the sofa. "Elena, I know this complicates things, but I can't pretend anymore. I'm falling in love with you." The words hit Elena like a thunderbolt. She had hoped, had dreamed, but to hear them spoken aloud made everything real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, and then Sam's hands were cupping her face, his thumb gently tracing her cheek. "Elena," he said softly, "I know this isn't how things are supposed to happen. I know there are proprieties to observe, and I know that tomorrow the whole town will be talking, but I can't let fear stop me from telling you how I feel." "What do we do now?" Elena asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Sam's answer would change everything, but neither of them could have anticipated just how dramatically their world was about to shift. Sam's hands were warm against Elena's face as he searched her eyes in the flickering firelight. The weight of his confession hung between them, transforming the comfortable familiarity of the ranch house into something charged with possibility and danger. "What we do now," Sam said quietly, his voice rough with emotion, "is face this together. But Elena, I need you to understand what that means. If we pursue this path, there's no going back to the way things were." Elena's heart raced as she considered his words. Everything rational told her to be cautious, to think of her mother's warnings and the precarious nature of their situation. But her heart, long starved of genuine affection, yearned for the love she could see reflected in Sam's gray eyes. "I understand," she whispered. "But Sam, what about the town? What about what Mr. Garrett said? If people are already talking, then we give them something worth talking about." Sam's voice carried a determination that made Elena's pulse quicken. "Elena Collins, I'm asking you to be my wife." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. Your wife? I know it seems sudden, but it's not really. I've been thinking about this since the day you arrived. You've brought life back to this house, back to me. You've made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond mere survival." Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "Sam, are you sure? Are you absolutely certain this isn't just loneliness or gratitude or—" "It's love," Sam interrupted gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Pure, simple love. I loved Sarah, and I always will. But that love belongs to my past. What I feel for you belongs to my future. Our future, if you'll have me." The sincerity in his voice broke through Elena's defenses. She thought of the weeks they'd spent together, the way he'd watched her work with quiet appreciation, the way he'd protected her from Garrett's advances, the way he'd treated her not as a servant, but as an equal partner in making their house a home. Yes, she breathed, the word escaping before she could second-guess herself. Yes, I'll marry you. Sam's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. Elena could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, could smell the familiar scent of leather and hay that clung to his clothes. For the first time in months, she felt completely safe. We should tell your mother, Sam said after a long moment, and we should make the arrangements as soon as possible. I won't have people questioning your honor any longer than necessary. Elena nodded, though part of her wished they could stay in this moment forever, suspended between the proposal and the reality of what would come next. She's going to be shocked. She's going to be relieved, Sam corrected. Your mother's been worried about your future since the day you arrived. This will give her the security she's been seeking. They found Martha in the kitchen the next morning, already preparing breakfast despite the early hour. She looked up as they entered together, and Elena saw her mother's eyes immediately take in their joined hands and the glow of happiness on both their faces. Mama, Elena said, her voice trembling with excitement. Sam has asked me to marry him. Martha's hand stilled on the coffee pot. For a moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the crackling of the fire in the stove. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her weathered face. And your answer? She asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. I said yes. Martha set down the coffee pot and moved to embrace her daughter. Oh, my dear girl. I'm so happy for you. So very happy. She turned to Sam, her expression becoming more serious. Sam Mackenzie, I hope you know what a treasure you're getting. My Elena has been through more hardship than any young woman should have to endure. If you hurt her, I won't, Sam said firmly. Mrs. Collins, I give you my word that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make her happy. Then you have my blessing. Martha's voice was thick with emotion. When will the wedding take place? As soon as possible, Sam replied. I was thinking we could speak to Reverend Patterson today, perhaps next Sunday. Elena felt a flutter of nervousness at the speed of it all, but she understood Sam's reasoning. The longer they waited, the more ammunition they gave to people like Thomas Garrett. A quick wedding would silence the gossips and give them the respectability they needed to build their life together. The trip to town that day was vastly different from the previous one. Instead of shopping for fabric and supplies, they were arranging for the most important day of Elena's life. Reverend Patterson, a kind man in his 60s who had officiated at hundreds of weddings, seemed genuinely pleased by their request. I've been hoping Sam would find love again, he told Elena as they discussed the ceremony. He's been alone too long and you've clearly brought him back to life. I can see it in his eyes. The wedding preparations became a whirlwind of activity. Elena threw herself into creating her wedding dress from the blue wool Sam had chosen for her, working late into the night by lamplight. Martha helped with the household preparations, planning a simple reception that would take place at the ranch after the ceremony. Word of the engagement spread quickly through Cedar Ridge, and the reactions were mixed. Many people were genuinely happy for Sam, recognizing that he deserved a second chance at love. Others, influenced by Garrett's earlier insinuations, remained skeptical. But Elena found that she cared less about public opinion with each passing day. Sam's love gave her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The most surprising reaction came from an unexpected source. 3 days before the wedding, Elena was in town picking up last-minute supplies when she was approached by Mrs. Elizabeth Hartford, the banker's wife and unofficial social arbiter of Cedar Ridge. Miss Collins, Mrs. Hartford said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I wonder if I might have a word with you. Elena braced herself for criticism or judgment, but Mrs. Hartford's expression was surprisingly kind. I wanted to tell you, the older woman continued, that I think you're doing a wonderful thing. Sam Mackenzie is one of the finest men in this territory, and he's been grieving far too long. You've given him something to live for again. Thank you, Mrs. Hartford. That means more than you know. I also wanted to tell you that not everyone believes Thomas Garrett's poison. Those of us who know Sam's character recognize genuine love when we see it. You have more support in this town than you might realize. Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. I appreciate that more than I can say. There's something else, Mrs. Hartford said, her voice lowering conspiratorially. I happen to know that Mr. Garrett owes the bank a considerable sum of money. His saloon hasn't been as profitable as he'd like people to believe. I suspect his interest in your previous situation had more to do with his own financial desperation than any genuine concern for morality. This revelation cast Garrett's behavior in an entirely new light. Elena realized that his pursuit of her had been motivated by greed rather than desire, and his attempts to damage her reputation were likely driven by resentment at losing a potential source of income. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because I want you to hold your head high on Sunday. You're marrying a good man for the right reasons, and anyone who suggests otherwise is either a fool or a liar. Sunday dawned clear and crisp, with the first real hint of spring in the air. Elena stood before her mirror in the blue wool dress she'd sewn with such care, her auburn hair arranged in an elegant twist adorned with small white flowers Martha had managed to find in the ranch's greenhouse. You look beautiful, Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. Your father would be so proud. Elena touched the silver locket at her throat, her father's last gift to her mother, now passed down to her on her wedding day. I wish he could be here. He is here, in spirit, and he would approve of your choice. Sam is the kind of man your father always hoped you'd find. Strong, honest, and devoted to your happiness. The ceremony at the small wooden church was simple but deeply moving. Elena walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, her eyes locked on Sam's face. He stood at the altar in his best suit, his gray eyes bright with love and promise. When Reverend Patterson asked if anyone objected to the union, Elena held her breath, half expecting Thomas Garrett to rise from the congregation. But the church remained silent except for the gentle rustle of the wind through the rafters. Do you, Samuel Mackenzie, take Elena Collins to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Sam said, his voice strong and clear. Do you, Elena Collins, take Samuel Mackenzie to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Elena whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Sam, you may kiss your bride. Sam's hands were gentle as he cupped Elena's face, his kiss soft and reverent. The congregation erupted in applause, and Elena felt a joy so pure it took her breath away. She was no longer Elena Collins, the desperate woman who had nearly been sold to save her family from starvation. She was Elena Mackenzie, beloved wife of one of the most respected men in the territory. The reception at the ranch was a celebration that brought the community together in ways Elena hadn't expected. Even some of the people who had initially been skeptical of their relationship seemed won over by the obvious happiness of the newlyweds. Sam barely left Elena's side, his pride and joy evident to everyone present. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Elena and Sam found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear Wyoming sky. Martha had tactfully retired to her room, leaving the newlyweds to their privacy. No regrets? Sam asked, his arm around Elena's waist as they stood together in the starlight. None, Elena replied, leaning into his warmth. What about you? Are you sure you're ready for this, for us? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Sam turned to face her, his expression serious. Elena, I know our beginning was unconventional. I know that some people will always believe we married for the wrong reasons. But I want you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or loneliness or convenience. I love you for who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your courage in the face of adversity. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Elena felt tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. I love you too, Sam. More than I ever thought possible. As they stood together under the vast Wyoming sky, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been facing the darkest hour of her life, prepared to sacrifice everything to save her family from starvation. Now she was married to a man who loved her completely, living in a house that had become a true home, with a future full of promise stretching out before them. The lonely rancher had indeed saved her from being sold, but in doing so, he had discovered that love was the greatest gift of all. Their story had begun with desperation and an act of compassion, but it had blossomed into something beautiful, a love that would endure through whatever challenges the frontier might bring. As Sam led her inside to begin their new life together, Elena knew that this was just the beginning. There would be hardships ahead, struggles and setbacks that would test their love and their commitment to each other, but they would face them together, as husband and wife, as partners in building something lasting and beautiful in the harsh but magnificent landscape of the American West. The storm that had brought them together had passed, but the love it had kindled would burn bright for all the years to come. What did you think of Sam and Elena's incredible love story? From that desperate moment in Morrison's store to their beautiful wedding under the Wyoming sky, their journey shows us that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the greatest love stories. Did Sam's act of compassion touch your heart as much as it did ours? And what about Elena's courage in the face of such difficult circumstances? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment from their story resonated most with you? If you enjoyed this tale of love conquering adversity in the Old West, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming stories that celebrate the power of human kindness and true love. Your support helps us bring you more incredible tales from America's frontier days.